Hi, everybody. My name is Eric. I'm an architect, and I'm going to talk to you today about all sorts of things. And this is a new presentation, and it's over 150 slides, and I'm going to try to get through it in about 40 minutes. And those of you who have heard me speak before, you know that I can do that because I talk pretty quickly. So I guess I'm both apologizing in advance and warning you that I'm going to try to time this right, but we'll see how it goes. Now, normally we would all be at the gas company in Downey, laughing, drinking, celebrating, hugging, smiling. Well, we can't do any of that this year again, but hopefully next year we can. And because I'm showing you a lot of slides very quickly, if you like, you can take screenshots of the slides as I go, or I'm happy to send them to you. Also, normally I'd be able to hear you laughing, and I won't be able to. But if you're laughing, maybe unmute so I can hear you laughing. And if you're not laughing, then don't unmute, because I definitely don't want to hear your scowling. So keep that in mind. And then also, if you want to get in touch with me, there's my personal email address, and you can tweet at me or whatever. And then as a special bonus, you can also text the word green to that number. And I've also put that number in the chat. And that is not my phone number. So don't send me pictures of your junk or anything. That's not, I won't get those messages. Just text the word green to that phone number and you'll get an automated response, and I'll be able to send you the slides. That's how that works. So that's pretty cool. But again, not my number, so don't get creepy. Oh, okay, so I'm not in LA. I'm reporting to you from beautiful war-torn Portland, Oregon, just north. And it's been a pretty crazy year here too. Not just because of COVID, but I don't know if you've been watching the news, but it's been a little nuts. But please come visit, because it's not as bad as you hear. Also, this is my 14th year speaking at MGBCE. Some of you weren't even born yet, probably, when I first started speaking. And Farah said that if I speak next year for my 15th time, that I get a free Waffle House gift card. So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be exciting. Okay, so how was your year? Have anything new? What's been going on? Because I'm all vaccinated now, and I'm basically hugging strangers on the street at this point. This is pretty fun. But I'm not what you call an indoor cat. Like, normally I like to be out and mixing with people. So it's been a real weird year for me. I've been getting into some weird stuff here in the house. And I started a bunch of hobbies to keep myself busy. I made these little stickers for restroom towels, and I just put them everywhere and people start screaming in the middle of a restroom, which gives me amusement. I started an art collection of people that are completely unaware of their camera in Zoom, and now I have a gallery showing that I'm going to be launching soon. That's kind of fun. I applied to become an astronaut. That's true. I applied to become an astronaut, and oddly enough, I haven't heard back yet. I think I'm too short. I'm not quite sure, but wanted to see what would happen. I also applied to work in the Biden-Harris administration, like probably half of you. And there was a question on the application, and this is true. And it said, do you identify with any communities that are underrepresented in government? And as a white guy, I didn't know what to put, so I just put comedian. And I haven't heard back from them either. I probably won't. But what else did I do? I started a podcast with my friend Eve called Care by Design. That's actually true. You can check it out. And we do it sporadically because Eve's busier than me. But it's fun, and we've had some amazing conversations around equity and design and healthcare and so forth. I also wrote a book this year because trapped indoors, I get a little restless. So I wrote a book, and it just came out, and it's here. You can get it here. I encourage you all to buy it, and it's on the circular economy. And yes, Jesse, I miss your laugh. And why did I write about the circular economy? Well, the circular economy is actually I see it as the framework that we need to solve the problems that are facing us. That's why I chose to write the book, because the traditional linear economy is what we call a take, make, waste economy. And the circular economy really describes an alternative to that of, instead of take, make, waste, it's harvest, make, and remake over and over and over again. And this is the framework that companies like Adidas and IKEA and Intel and Amazon and Patagonia are now implementing at scale for their products. And we got to incorporate all of them into the book and interview them for the book. So it was kind of amazing. So it made the year fly by a little faster than normal. But now that we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and now that we're getting vaccinated and we're opening up again, what happens now? Where do we go from here? And that's the thing that I've been really working with our clients on. Because if you think about it, what has been your biggest driver to transformation at your company this past year? Was it that your CEO had some amazing vision? Was it that your CTO implemented some new groundbreaking collaborative technology? Or was it that little guy? And I'm willing to bet it was that little guy. I'm willing to bet that probably drove more digital transformation this past year than in the 10 years that preceded it. And so it shows that we can do things when we need to. But maybe we should start to reimagine what it is we need to do. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to talk to you about three things. One, I'm going to talk to you about the urgency of this work, which you've been hearing all day today, but I'm going to, I guess, put a little bow on it. We're going to talk about how to redefine cost, and we're going to talk about how to implement an innovation approach to change management to implement some of these cutting edge things. And so I'm going to start with the urgency, and because the urgency is quite great. And what we've discovered is that you can't do this one building at a time. A house is not a house. An office building is not just an office building. It's actually contained to a multitude of other systems, infrastructures, right? Redundancies, inefficiencies, and so forth. So doing it one building at a time almost seems silly. In my past life, I was at eco-districts, and that really taught me the value of working at this district scale. And now we're seeing essentially every client as a district, every client as a campus. And the amount that we need to build in the time that we have is just astronomical. We need to essentially build the equivalent of New York City every 5 weeks for the next 40 years. That's like adding, that's doubling the world's building stock by 2060, I believe. And if you don't have an idea of how big that is, here's New York in, 90 years ago. And there's the Empire State Building, by the way, which you kind of see through the smog there. And when I lived in New York, I worked 2 blocks from the Empire State Building. And so that was always kind of my, my goalpost, my kind of focus area. And then just 90 years later, you can see how much New York City has grown in and of. So you can't see the Empire State Building anymore. Well, that's the area that we need to build every 5 weeks worldwide. And so we're facing an unprecedented amount of construction that we need to build. And if we do it the traditional way, it's going to just be game over in terms of climate. And China is not making this easier, because China used more cement in 2 years than all of the United States used in the entire 20th century. So they're doing some cool things. I don't want to just badmouth China, but their sheer size and scale is so nuts. They open like 50 bridges a year. I mean, it's just an immense amount of stuff they're building. And not that we're so great either, because there are 4 new dollar stores that open every day in the US. So that means every single day, 4 dollar stores open. So today, on the day of the MGBCE, 4 dollar stores open somewhere in the world. There are now more dollar stores than there are Walmarts, McDonald's, and CVS combined. Half of all the new stores built this year are dollar stores. Can you get my point? And if you've ever been to a dollar store, it's great for getting things like pencils, I guess, but it's full of crap. It's a lot of plastic crap. And now in 2020, we passed a very grim milestone. This is where the depressing part, by the way. But all of the global human-made mass on Earth now exceeds all the living biomass. In other words, all the stuff that humans make, those like rollerblades that are sitting in your closet, all that crap, that now outweighs all of life on Earth, which kind of makes sense that the richest guy on Earth is the guy that sells us all this junk, right? So I guess that makes sense. And that's why I wrote a book about the circular economy. That's why I'm using this as a framework to create zero waste and zero energy campuses. Because in that take, make, waste approach, each of those phases makes Kanye unhappy. You know what I'm saying? Like none of it's good. And so we can do a lot better. And so I kind of feel like we're this kid. We're just like, just completely oblivious to what's right there over our shoulder. And we need to change that. It also turns out that every single president since John F. Kennedy has been aware of climate change, has discussed it as a policy position, and has pretty much failed, which is why it's been so exciting to see what President Biden has done. On Earth Day, just last month, he then made a bold 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. There's been more action in climate policy in the last 3 months than there has been in certainly the 3 years that preceded it, and maybe even in the 10 or 12 years that preceded that. And so we need bold action. And it's not like you haven't been warned, right? Like we've been sneaking this into your mass media for years, like trying to give you the hint, and you haven't been picking up the hint too much. But really, we've been trying to tell you like something bad is happening. And so if you want a representation of where we are, this is where we are. We're here. And the decisions that we make now, this year, are going to determine what kind of future we're going to have, right? We are at the proverbial fork in the road, and the decisions we make today are going to have a huge impact on what that future looks like. And all the futures are not great, by the way, but they go from crappy to incredibly crappy and everything in between, right? So 1.5 degrees all the way up to 8. And if we just do nothing, we're headed to the worst one. We're headed to 8 degrees. So we need to do action. We need to take, so I kind of feel like we're these happy little dinosaurs, just kind of like oblivious of, what's overhead. Again, I've been trapped indoors for a year. So you can see where I'm kind of ranting away here. All right. So Jim Collins wrote a book. Well, he's written a few books, but he wrote a book. And in the book, he asks his clients, what are the 5 most brutal facts facing you today? And it's an exercise that I like so much that I do it with our clients, right? What are the 5 most brutal facts facing your industry or your company or whatever today? And then I did it for myself. And I realized the 5 most brutal facts facing us are: 1, climate change is going to drive a price on carbon. That is inevitable. I don't know when, but it's going to happen. 2, that liability is going to make entire regions uninsurable. And by regions, I mean either geographic regions or industries, but whole swaths of the country and the economy are going to become uninsurable because of the climate crisis. 3, we still don't have a viable low-cost, low-carbon alternative to concrete. Yes, I know about carbon cure. You don't need to tell me about carbon cure. We've been using it. It's not enough. We still don't have a viable alternative to this. And yes, mass timber is great, but doesn't really work for hospitals just yet. So I know, I'm right there with you, but it's a brutal fact. Number 4, that material demand and the sheer need for materials of how much we need to build is going to require that we can't keep harvesting stuff. It's going to require that we really deploy engineered living materials. We're going to have to grow materials in a way that we've never done before, and we're probably not that accustomed to yet. We have to do this. And number 5, we are not, as an industry, really deploying technology in any meaningful way to achieve any sort of sense of scale or speed compared to other industries. The construction industry is still building relatively the same way it has been for 200 years. And so these are my 5 brutal facts that I'm operating under. These are the ones that I pitch to our clients. These are the ones that I tell our CEO and our leadership, right? This is what we're operating under. And if you have others, let me know. But 5 was all I could handle. Quite frankly, it's just a lot for people to bear. Okay. So what are we doing about it? Well, what we're doing is we're doing a bunch of things. 1, we're really making everything as efficient as possible. We're targeting net zero on every single project now in some way, or at least having the conversation. We're using every tool in our toolbox, and I'm going to show you some of those tools today. We're really looking at measuring everything measurable, so that way we can do stuff about it and make really informed choices. And we're really stressing the urgency to our clients that we need to do it now. And whenever possible, we're trying to deploy natural solutions to this, whether that's biophilia, living machines, phytoremediation, microremediation, whatever else, we're doing it. And so these are kind of our, mini roadmap, as it will, to deal with those 5 facts that I showed you. Because the truth of the matter is that the construction industry is woefully inadequate. We are not really deploying data or insights or productivity or automation or prefabrication or mass customization or any of those cool things in a way that's really moving the needle yet. Now, there's lots of companies doing this. I know some of you are dealing with those companies, but they are not. My company, Canon Design, we actually have a prefabrication division. And so we're looking at how to build hospitals cheaper, faster, better, stronger, whatever. And we're really trying to look at data and insight in a whole new way, in a way that really can scale some of this. So what we need is really like extreme makeover carbon edition. That's really what we need. And we can't wait. We can't wait until 2050 to do something about it. Because of the time value of carbon, we need to do it now. We need to make 80% of our cuts really by 2030. And to really remind you of this, 2030 is not 10 years away, it's 8.5 years away. Remember that. So it's coming at us pretty quick. So we have no time, really. As we tell our clients, every 2030 plan, 2040 plan, 2050 plan is really a today plan. So if you have a 2050 plan that you're real proud of and you're bragging about on your website, but you're not implementing it, you better pull that thing off the bookshelf and dust it off and put it in action now. Every 2050 plan is a today plan, whether we like it or not. There's a guy that I follow on Twitter who's pretty funny. He's up in Seattle, and he wrote this tweet and just over Christmas, and it kind of caught me off guard because it was so simple. But he said, we can save the carbon equivalent of taking 10 million cars off the road if we just took, 10 million cars off the road. And it kind of blew my mind because we're always kind of using that as some sort of metric. And I don't know, to me, it was, it had a lot of power. Anyway, I know some of you heard the stories that during the pandemic that our carbon footprint went down, and it did. Certainly, we stopped driving everywhere, we stopped flying everywhere, right? And our carbon footprint responded accordingly. But every crisis, our carbon footprint drops some, but in COVID, it dropped more than any other, that's for sure. But unfortunately, if you put it into the context of the overall trend, you can see that we're going to make up those gains pretty quickly, right? We haven't really lost much of anything. And because of the time value of carbon, we can't wait to do it. So net zero energy is great, and we're deploying it at scale for every project, but we really have to look at the embodied carbon too, because we can't just release that burp of carbon with all that we're building now. We need to basically make zero carbon buildings today. At the end of the year last year, I went to our CEO and I said, I did the numbers and our carbon footprint dropped by 73%. And he said, why? And I said, mostly because we didn't go anywhere. We didn't fly anywhere and our carbon footprint dropped. And he said, well, how much did that save us? And I said, I don't know. I'm not an accountant. I'm an architect. What do I know? And so I looked it up and it saved us $2 million as a company. So we saved $2 million by not flying anywhere and cut our carbon footprint by 73%. And so what we did was we released that to everybody as a carbon bonus. So everybody at Canon Design got a carbon bonus this year. It was like about $1,100. It was a pretty big bonus, right? $1,100 as a carbon bonus because of this. And I'm using that to try to keep that going. Like, let's not get on planes so quickly. Let's keep this whole Zoom thing going on for a little while. Because of those 5 brutal facts, really, I'm facing this. I'm facing the fact that every time we demolish a building, or every time we build an all glass curtain wall, or every time we're not targeting net zero, anytime we do any of that, that's a form of climate denial in my mind. You could disagree with me, but really that's how I see it. Anytime we're doing the old way of doing things, we're really not accepting the reality that's facing us. And therefore, by definition, it's climate denial. And I lose sleep over this. I don't know how to deal with this in any other way. And so it's really forcing us to change the conversation with our clients around this in some sort of meaningful way. It's a hard truth, I know, but I have to deal with it. And the only thing that gets me through all this is the fact that we completely changed our planet's climate by accident. So what gives me hope is realizing, well, imagine what we could do if we actually tried. That kind of, for some reason, bolsters me a little bit. But if you're really looking for something to sell to your board or your leadership team or something like that, just remind them of this. Remind them of the fact that all of this carbon pollution has other impacts as well. And maybe that'll get them to, pay attention. Okay, number 2. I told you 3 things, right? Number 2, we need to redefine how we describe cost. Because cost is not about cost, as I think you've all discovered. Because if it's something that people want, they don't even talk about the price of things, right? We build $1.6 billion stadiums that are used 8 times a year that by people spending money they don't have to watch a bunch of millionaires play a game. So it's not about the money then, is it, right? Like, we don't mind spending the money when it's something like that. I was in a meeting for a hospital, and we were talking about deploying a healthy building strategy. So that way we wouldn't use any sort of known carcinogens in the entire building. And they were asking, well, how much is it going to cost? And I said, well, actually not that much. And we'll see an immediate payback on air quality, but it'll probably cost you, I don't know, about $16,000 more just to deploy some of these measures that we're talking about. And they're like, $16,000. Oh my God, 16,000. And then in the same breath, like the words 16,000 were still in the air. In that same breath, the client then turned to somebody else and said, hey, where are we with that $26 million parking garage that we're building next door? So the $16,000 that he was upset about, but the $26 million to subsidize free parking for everybody, it didn't even occur to him that that's a problem. So it's not about cost. By the way, I was in a meeting not too long ago, and we're talking about the lead on the the lead stuff on the project. And one of the engineers, and I won't say who, because you all probably know who he is, but one of the engineers said, "Hey, I ate a salad today. How many lead points does that get us?" Like, that was his big joke. And the answer, as you all know, is 2. It gets you about 2 lead points, which is, not bad. But that's the kind of thinking that we're dealing with, right? This kind of chasing points, this checklist-driven approach. And I'm really trying to break that paradigm a little bit and redefine what it means to have cost. Because think about what General Motors has done. What a brilliant innovation they did. They somehow subsidized all of their infrastructure to the American people, right? We spend $177 billion a year maintaining the freeway system. That's every year, 177 billion, maintaining the freeway infrastructure so everybody can drive everywhere. That does not even count parking garages. That's just roads. And it's 2.6 trillion, all told, spent since 1952, when we started this whole grand experiment, spent on that. It's by far the largest public works project that anybody has ever done anywhere in the world, and we continue to do it every year. So it's not about the money. Something that my friend Sarah Neff said to me once, she said, nobody ever questions the cost of the Christmas decorations, do they? Right? That doesn't need an ROI. And I thought, well, we do that all the time. Like, nobody ever questions the cost of the coffee or the donuts or any either, right? It's just built into it. It's the same as sustainability. These have a payback. It might not be financial, but they all have some sort of payback. Maybe it makes people feel better. Maybe it keeps employees happy. Maybe it improves student morale, but it all has a payback. It might not be as financial or direct line as you think. And so that's really how I'm changing the thinking around it. The former guy who just left the president's office, he was very interested in coal, and he kept trying to save coal. Well, if you look at the numbers, there's not much to save there. There's about 46,000 people that work in the coal industry here in this country, and it's not that many. There are more yoga instructors than there are people that work in the coal industry. And I'd rather save the yoga instructors, quite frankly, because I know most of them, and they're really nice people. Also, it's not about the industry either, because 46,000 coal workers in this country, well, there's 3.3 million people working in clean tech. So clearly, in terms of an industry, coal is dying, and it's not worth saving, quite frankly. Let's train them to work in the new industry, the growing industry of clean energy. Doesn't that make more sense? So it's never been about the money. What is it about then? It's about fear. And so we talk about fear with our clients. And it's a weird conversation to have with your clients, because normally you don't want to talk about what are your worst fears, right? We don't talk, but we map out their fears. We map out their assumptions. This idea of chasing money is a trap, and it doesn't work. And it's also one that's stacked against you. Again, $26 million parking garage goes unquestioned. $26,000 for healthy non-cancer causing materials gets scrutinized. So it's not about the money, it's about the trap of chasing the money, especially given all of the benefits that these approaches provide. So that's what we're doing. We're redefining cost and redefining payback by including all these other benefits with that. We ask these clients, we make a list of outcomes, and then we ask them, what is all of this stuff worth to you? In other words, if you don't have sick employees anymore, what is that worth to you? And some of our clients are already starting to measure this, right? They're realizing that organizations with a high happiness coefficient have certain benefits that they keep seeing over and over again. And all of this has led me to the conclusion that sustainability doesn't cost you anything. Say that sustainability doesn't cost you money, it makes you money. In fact, it pays for itself. You can't afford not to do it. And so if you're not doing it, you're missing out. So stop scrutinizing me, and instead let's get to work to design to those outcomes. Because comparing, the healthy materials that don't cause cancer in a building to everything else is not really an apples to apples comparison, or in this case, an orange slices to orange slices comparison. They're not the same orange slices, right? There are orange slices, and then there are, orange slices. See the difference? And so they're not all created equal. So that's why we're starting to measure so much more than just the financial payback. Okay. Did you guys watch Chernobyl on HBO? And if you didn't, you totally should. It was really good. But one of the things that struck me on that series, and I'd forgotten this, was when the explosion happened, they were using meters that measured the radiation, what they called Röntgen, right? And the engineers at the time said, no, it's fine because the meter says that it's only 3.6 Röntgen. Well, the meters only went to 3.6. The real number was 15,000 Röntgen, which is like, deadly. but they kept looking at the meter saying, well, the meter says 3.6 and that's fine. So they were measuring using tools that didn't measure right. And I realized that we kind of do the same thing in the building industry. We use antiquated metrics to do this. Same thing occurred in New York. You've heard of Typhoid Mary in New York in the 1930s. Well, there was a physician in New York around that same time, and he was renowned in his ability to predict which patients would get typhoid. Patients would line up at his office on Park Avenue, and they would come in, and he would touch their tongue with his fingers, and he would squeeze their tongue, and he'd go, yep, you're going to get typhoid. Well, it turns out he had no magical ability. It turns out he had typhoid, and he was infecting all of his patients. That's what he was doing. And so anytime we get into that kind of spitting match with, well, what's it going to cost, and what's the payback, and is it worth it, and how many months for our, like, that is basically, we're infecting our own conversation like that. We're essentially creating the feedback and reinforcing the exact wrong lesson that we don't want to teach. So what I want to look at is green building as the ultimate opportunity it is. And what we're seeing is we're seeing a potential savings of 10 trillion by the end of the century. And so how do we cash in on that money, that $10 trillion worth of savings? Because if you look at hospitals, most of them are dismal, right? They're failures in terms of their wait time, their comfort level, and their stress. If you look at schools, same thing. There are failures in terms of how uninspired the spaces are, the lighting in the spaces, and how wasteful they are in terms of food, energy, everything. Your office, the same way. You want everybody to come back to work. Well, how are you going to do that when you've got poor air, poor lighting, and everybody's so disconnected from one another? So all of this is an opportunity for us to rethink those spaces. And it turns out that if we change what we measure, we can change the world. And I'm not saying that in a hyperbolic sense. I mean, in a very literal sense, if we change the measure of success of a building, we could change our impact on the planet. Think about how we normally measure success in a building, right? It's cost per square foot, it's revenue per square foot, maybe payback, usually schedule, right? That's more, did you build it on time and on budget? Those are usually the two metrics. But how should we measure success? Shouldn't it be something more profound? Shouldn't it be, well, if I shorten patient recovery time, or if I reduce the stress on them, or if I'm able to retain staff, those things are also measurable. Don't they also have value? And what are those things worth to you? And if we keep expanding on that idea, what we should measure in terms of success, wouldn't it also include, well, how many kilowatts are you generating? How many tons of CO2 are you sequestering? How much biodiversity are you building into the site? Aren't those things also measurable? Aren't those things also valuable? And aren't those things also worth something to you? And so that's what we're doing. We're adding these metrics. We're adding these measures of success to our clients. And there's a lot of them. And if you want more, email me and I'll send you the list that we're using. But there's about 26 different metrics that we're really deploying and more, which leads us to number 3, this innovation approach. And how I realized a few years ago that ultimately what we're doing, wanting to change people's minds, wanting to really try new things, wanting to break out of the mold of traditional construction, what all of us are doing, all of you and me, is we're really engaging everybody in a change management strategy of innovation, right? That you need to commit to sustainability at the beginning. It can't be this thing that's tacked on at the end. It can't be the last 5 minutes of the agenda of discussion items. It has to be done at the beginning. That was one of the things I discovered early on at Canon, is people would add me to the agenda and they'd put me last. And I would say to them, don't put me last, put me at the beginning, because it'll set the tone for the entire conversation. And now that's the norm, right? Not because I want to go first, but because I know it'll alter the conversation for the rest of the agenda, the rest of the meeting. And so I suggest you do the same thing. You got to bake it into the process and realize that this is how we're measuring success. And then when we go around the meeting, there are a whole bunch of people that were telling me what they think. And so one little trick that I want to teach you all is, if you hear people starting to tell you, well, I think this and I think that, stop them and say, listen, don't tell me what you think. Tell me what you wonder. Tell me what you're wondering about. That's what I'm interested in. Wonder is the beginning of innovation. Wondering is the beginning of possibility. So if you change it to, well, I think that we won't be able to achieve net zero, to, I wonder if we can achieve net zero, that has a profound effect. And then we start playing this game of, what else do you wonder? I wonder if we could never have a sick kid ever again come to school. I wonder if we could feed all the poor kids. We're having conversations now, I can't say the client, but we're having conversations now with a big cancer center and saying, what if you just gave treatment to everybody in the neighborhood for free? What would that mean? What would that look like? And how would that actually work? Because you don't actually depend on that revenue, right? And so wonder is a great starting point for innovation. It turns out that people telling you their opinion as fact is part of how we got into this mess. So think about it. Arguably one of history's smartest people, Socrates, said very famously, all I know is that I know nothing. Remember that? And there's something to that. It turns out that people that tell you how smart they are usually not very smart. In fact, history has shown that anytime you hear people that brag about how smart they are, they're usually not that smart. And so don't tell me what you think, tell me what you wonder. That's what interests me. And that's the starting point of innovation, because we are surrounded by morons. We're surrounded by dumb people. This is a town, this is in North Carolina, a town called Woodland. And they rejected solar panels. They banned solar panels in the town. Why? Because they were afraid the solar would prevent the plants from growing. I'm not making that up. That's a real thing. And one of the people on the committee was a retired science teacher. That's how frightening this all is. So we are surrounded by morons, and you know that better than anybody, because we've all been surrounded by morons for a year and seeing how they can't even understand simple things like if you breathe on people, they'll get sick, right? You can't understand how, well, if you go have a party on the beach without a mask, people are going to get sick 2 weeks later. So you think you're going to get people to voluntarily curb emissions when they can't understand basic science? It's not going to happen, right? It's laughable, really. Besides, people have other things on their mind. They got like whatever the hell's going on with mayonnaise right now. Like they got to worry about that more than anything. And so I get it. So let's just change the conversation in a meaningful way. I saw this ad. This is a bad segue, by the way, but I saw this ad for the Hopper. Do you know what this is? This is it's like a DVR for your satellite, and the ad was bragging how it records 2,000 hours of television. Well, 2,000 hours is a year of work. That's a full-time job. That's a year's worth of work. It's 2,000 hours. So who the hell are these people that can watch a whole year of work on TV? I don't know. That's another side. Okay. Innovation is the key to this strategy. And innovation is messy. And it's never what you think it should look like. And if you don't believe me, just remember that the inventor of the light bulb did it by candlelight. So innovation is never as clean as we might see in the movies or on that Hopper, that television, right? It's always messy, and innovation is required. If you look at the great companies in 1955, 88% of them are now gone. Why? Because they failed to innovate. When I was a child growing up, Kodak was synonymous with photography. It was one and the same, really. There was Kodak and nothing else, right? Every camera used Kodak film. That's just the way it worked. And now they are virtually put out of business by a company that didn't even exist 10 years ago. That's kind of amazing. And which is why if you ask executives, virtually all of them say that innovation is a strategic priority for them. They must innovate or they will go away. And my childhood is filled with beautiful, wonderful objects that I loved and spent a lot of time with that are now gone because at some point they stopped innovating. They rested on their laurels and just stayed that way. They held their top spot in their prime, but then they went down. That's kind of the trouble. And most organizations are not built for innovation. They're not built for using new models. They're really built on really squeezing the blood out of the existing models and keeping things, the status quo, going. So innovation is something you have to actually choose. It won't happen by accident. You have to make it happen. And in Canon Design, that's what we've been doing. We've really been pushing this, that we really see innovation as an avalanche, that it's every little snowflake contributing to this idea, right? It can't just be one person. Everybody has to be empowered to do this. And by the way, I'm not just making, I mean, we know what we're talking about because Canon was several years in a row, one of the most innovative companies by Fast Company. And this year we got #2 most innovative. And by the way, the #1, this is kind of sad. The #1 company, in case you're wondering, was Chobani Yogurt. I mean, which is, they make a good yogurt, but they're more innovative than us, really? Anyway, I'm complaining. Okay, so what have we done as one of the most innovative companies in the country? What have we done? Well, we've committed to net zero energy on every project, cutting embodied carbon in half by 2030, which again is 8.5 years, not 10 years away, a healthy materials strategy on every project, and a resiliency strategy on every project. So that way, at least we can have that conversation. And what we discovered is that the pain points for the client are the openings for innovation. Whatever they're struggling with the most is really the opportunity to inject something new, which is why we've been asking them about, well, what are you worried about? What are your brutal facts? What are your fears? And so we lay down these provocations to them very early in the design process. What if this was the healthiest hospital in the country? What if this was the healthiest school in the country? What if this is the healthiest building on your campus? We find some provocation that resonates with them, and then we lay that down as a goal, and then we all work towards that goal. And then I remind them that everything I show them has a payback. It might not be financial, but it has some payback. Every single thing I show, single thing you show has a payback. It's just a matter, are we choosing to acknowledge it? Might be cultural, might be social, might be economic, it might be all of them. Because I'm tired of having these arguments, as I'm sure you are, of why we shouldn't put cancer-causing chemicals in a building where children are. I don't see how in good conscience we can even have that conversation anymore. So I'm just not having it, right? We're talking about creating a vision for them instead. I'm engaging them in a change management strategy. I'll show them a bunch of outcomes and a bunch of priorities, and I'll turn the control over to them, and I'll have them set the dials in the workshops. You tell me what your priorities are, and I'll show you how we get there. Sometimes I'll do it with ROI and payback, right? What is your expected ROI? Because the payback for mechanical systems, well, that could be 10 or 15 years. They're fine with that. But something like a staff improvement, they might want to see that payback in 2 or 3 years. That's fine. You tell us where you want them. Sometimes we do it with waste, right? What's costing you money to throw away? Again, another pain point that's an opportunity to innovate. Sometimes we do it with risks and liability. What are you worried about? What's keeping you up at night? And I'll show you how sustainability could help you deal with that in a meaningful way. We've been doing these resiliency assessments on every project now. We do them in the proposals, right? We kind of run this resiliency dashboard based on where the location is, and it gives them a full picture of where they are. And these dashboards are pretty comprehensive. They're, again, pretty depressing, but pretty amazing. And then we also kind of meet the client where they are, right? So some of them, they've never done sustainability before, and some of them have a deep pedigree with sustainability. So we kind of shake it. Do you want the Camry version, the Prius version, or the Tesla version? And wherever you are, we'll meet you, but we're going to engage in that conversation. And from this process, we now have dozens of clients where they're building their healthiest building on campus or their greenest building on campus. And it's kind of funny to me to have multiple clients all bragging about the same thing, right? This is Ohlone College. This is in Northern California. This is the first net zero energy community college. It's LEED Platinum, and all part of a much larger vision that they have. This is the Caltech Resnick Sustainability Center in Pasadena. It will be their greenest building when it's done. We're still in design now, but it's beautiful building. Mass timber building, net zero energy, blah, 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 right? All this stuff. It's the greenest building on their campus. This is the Florida Student Health Center. It's WELL Platinum. It'll be the greenest building on their campus, and it's changed the conversation about how they look at new buildings moving forward. This is Illini Hall in University of Illinois, greenest building on their campus, and it sits across from an old Altgeld Hall, this old 1834 building that's just gorgeous that we're also renovating and remodeling, and that's also going to be LEED Platinum, but different rating system. This is a new one. This is Penn Medicine's Princeton Cancer Center. We're still in design on this one. It'll be the greenest building they've ever built, net zero energy building, and zero cancer-causing chemicals in the building, because how stupid is it to put cancer materials in a cancer center, right? So that's what we're doing. And now we're looking with our clients of how can you make a building maybe make them feel something? And so we're looking at things like, what if the building could trigger certain brain chemistries, right? Serotonin to make them feel calm or at ease when they arrive, or endorphins to boost their immunity, which would be great for patients, or oxytocin to make freshmen feel welcome when they come in every year, or dopamine to motivate them to study. Depending on the use of the space, could we trigger these brain chemistries and elicit the response that we want? Because we realize that the building, take a typical hospital, the patient experience is dreadful, right? It doesn't start in the treatment room. It starts in the drive to the building. They're already freaked out, right? Everybody arriving at a cancer center is freaked out. So we're looking at how do we interject sustainability to all of these different experiences along the way, most of which happen before they even ever get treated. These are the tools that we're deploying and using. I'm sharing these with you because I want you to see what we're using. I know many of you are using the same ones. If you have ones that I should add to the list, please share and I'll share with you. We're using Tally and EC3 to track embodied carbon and getting great results with both, by the way. This is a list of manufacturers that I wanted to include that I have no affiliation with them. I've worked with all of them, but they're just really good at their transparency and the material health and their EPDs. And so I like to promote that. I'm on the advisory board of this group called erase40.org. They're using behavioral science to show people how to reduce their carbon emissions. I'm on the advisory board of GeoShip, which is a bioceramic material that's twice the strength and half the weight of concrete. So it's a zero carbon concrete. Remember I told you my brutal fact? Well, so I joined the advisory board here. I'm also in the advisory board of Glovell, which is a foam glass gravel made from recycled glass. So it's backfill, very unsexy material. It's just foundation backfill, but all from recycled glass from a zero carbon product and a zero carbon company. Really great story behind it. I've also been following other companies. I have no affiliation with these, but I just want to let you know about them. This is Carbonate. They're finding that if they expose the aggregate to CO2, they can speed up the carbonation reaction. This is Solidia. They're injecting CO2 into the voids of concrete. This is Blue Planet. They're coating the aggregate with like a caked on CO2. This is Carbon Cure. They're injecting CO2 into the water that's used in the mix. They're all basically going about the same thing, but in a different way, but they're using concrete as a carbon sink instead of a carbon source. This is Biomason. They're doing bio-based recycled stone mixed with bacteria, and they're growing tiles. They're really quite beautiful, by the way. This is Ecovative. Actually, I got a piece right here. It's mushroom, it's mycelium that's grown. I'm sure you've all seen this by now, but it leads to a whole suite of bioengineered living materials. And we're tracking all of them in some way. These are all zero carbon and carbon sequestering materials, and I wanted to share them with you. And we have carbon numbers for all of them. So we are really taking this down to a level of science that we couldn't do even just 3 years ago. We're also looking at automation and robots, and I'm following, again, I have no interest in any of these companies other than I'm just curious, right? Doing very cool things with 3D printing and fabrication. These are companies that are doing cool things with artificial intelligence and tracking building sites, and I'm just following all of them, and I'm sharing them with you so you can do the same. I have no interest, no financial interest in any of them. We've been trying to deploy 3D printing in some meaningful way to mixed results, but it's still pretty cool. I think we've been looking at automation of robots to solve some of the issues of speed and scale and cost. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. The one last thing, the most depressing thing is, since I started this talk, 1.5 million tons of CO2 have been released. So if you don't get the whole urgency of this, just realize that carbon doesn't sleep, and we need to do something about it. Hopefully this has opened your eyes a little bit to the conversation. If not, let's talk about it. But if you can do this with your clients, if you can engage them in this way, in this kind of change management innovation strategy, I can tell you that it has a profound effect on the quality of the conversations that we're having, and really changing how we look at costs, how we look at these sustainable systems that we're putting into the building. And if we do that, isn't that the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? And wouldn't that, quite frankly, make everybody happy? Okay, as I said, text the word green to that number in the corner there. I also put it in the chat, and it'll send you the slides. Otherwise, put your questions in the chat box here on Zoom, and we'll get to them. If you put them on Whova, then somebody will communicate them, I guess. But otherwise, we can use the last 6 minutes for questions. Thank you. Any questions? None of you laughed, or none of you went off mute. I couldn't hear any laughter. No questions? Where are you with growing buildings and your X Prize? Great question. So a few years ago at MGBC, I showed how we were doing an X Prize to grow a building, and it took a weird turn. So I started working even more with the X Prize folks, and then started working on several X Prizes, including a cool one for equitable regenerative communities with Pharrell, which was kind of neat. But it kind of stalled the whole X Prize of growing buildings, because that one X Prize mapped out a housing roadmap that we ended up doing that mapped out 20 different X Prizes that need to be done. And you can download the roadmap for free from xprize.org if you want to see it. If not, I'll point you in the right direction. But we're still trying. Right before the shutdown in October 2019, right, we were at the X Prize Summit again and pushing the idea again. I got to meet Harrison Ford, and I was freaking out because I'm a Star Wars nerd, and that's all I really remember is Harrison Ford. But there were some things with the X Prize thing going on at the time that was very nice. But I'm still trying. I've also expanded kind of the circle of experts that we have. There have been some kind of amazing things, and now the healthy building world is colliding with the bioengineered world. So there's some, if you need a list, we maintain a list, and I'm happy to send that to you too. I'd love to get more people talking about it and doing about it. And then I recorded a TED Talk if you want to see what Julie's talking about how we can grow buildings. But I'm still obsessed with it. I just don't know where to like make the thing happen. Danielle asks, what tool is Canon using for resiliency risk assessment? Oh my God. So we're looking at a bunch of ones and we're trying out different ones. The one that I'm probably most interested in is the 427 one. And it's not 427, it's not the numbers, they spell out 427. And I'm using the climate risk finder for a lot of that data that you saw on the dashboard. But I want to do it the way Danielle does it, I think, right? We're looking at entire real estate portfolios and do it in a more meaningful way. But right now we're just collecting the data, and then I'm using the resiliency frameworks that we developed at Eco Districts as my kind of guideline for that. But if you have a more robust resiliency solution, please share it. Misty says, is the recycled glass fill as strong as the material it will replace? It is stronger and lighter, oddly enough, because it's glass foam. And it's really quite cool. And it's, what I love about it is it's a product I never would have thought of, right? It's backfill, but that has a huge carbon footprint. And so it's really kind of neat. And the guy, Rob, who runs it, is also just a wonderful human. And that's always nice too. We met at a Passive House conference, I don't know, 6 years ago or something. And I've been obsessed with him ever since. What other questions?
Eric, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I have your book. I wanted to show you, but it is the video is not enabled.
Oh, I believe you. Hey, you mean this book?
Yeah, I know. I have it. I'm holding it.
This one I have to mail out to somebody, so it's signed. Let's see. There's signed. See?
I know. You need to sign mine too.
Yeah, I'm ready. Now I'm vaccinated.
Very
I can sign
exciting.
all your books. Thank
Sounds
you.
great.
And Danielle also has a book. She's got a children's book that's really
Yes.
adorable and beautifully illustrated. So they double plug.
Thank you, Eric.
Well, I miss seeing you, all your stupid faces in person, and next year we'll get to be in person again, hopefully. Think how long my hair will be by then. All right, I think 30 seconds left, right? Oh, there's Danielle's book. Julie put it in. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much. Good seeing you. There's more MGVC to go, right? There's other things going on.
There is. There's lots more to go.
Lots more to go.
I think we're back at the awards now.
No
And
rest
I want
for
to
the
stay
weary.
around for the end of the day too. Promise. Good closer. Thank you, Eric.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon.